So I've been getting a lot busier with more immigration interviews being scheduled now by USCIS. Um, this past week, I have been going to the local immigration office in Long Island City, which is in Queens, New York, and just a couple of observations from my being there. So I had two adjustment interviews this past week. Both of them had issues. I was kind of worried whether or not one of my clients would run into problems with immigration. And the reason why is because um, there have been reports of USCIS working together with ICE in some cases to try to pick up and detain clients who show up at interviews, appointments, or even biometrics appointments. This is what I'm hearing anecdotally from other immigration lawyers practicing in other parts of the country. Um, so that is something to be concerned about, especially if someone has an appointment with immigration and they are not in valid status. So for one of my clients, he is a applicant for green card based on marriage to a U.S. citizen, but he entered the U.S. on a temporary visa, a visitor visa, which expired a while ago. So, although in the past USCIS would normally not notify ICE just because someone who's married to a US citizen is eligible to adjust status if they were lawfully admitted into the United States. And for someone who entered on a visa and then overstayed, that counts as a lawful admission. Well, now the question is, do we now have to start worrying about USCIS contacting ICE and letting them know, look, we have someone here who is, a visa overstay. Luckily, in my case, that did not happen. But I couldn't help but worry, could this start happening in the future? So I'm happy to report that at least here in, the Queen's office, that does not seem to be a thing that's happening. We actually had a pretty nice professional immigration officer. So that was encouraging, right? Even though there's so many negative things happening in immigration, it's sometimes important to remember that, you know, as bureaucratic as the government agencies can be, um, it is still made up of individual employees, right? So not every single employee will necessarily be anti-immigrant, right? And that's kind of good to know and good to remind yourself, right? Not just assuming that it's just one monolithic, anti-immigrant machine. So I am still seeing officers treating clients and lawyers respectfully, being professional, applying the law, and let's hope that it continues this way. Um, I think the other thing to note is that, here in New York, maybe we are lucky, right? We have a field office that is, for the most part, fairly decent, right? I've heard other not so nice reports of other field offices in other areas of the country. So as far as I'm seeing, the USCIS officers here are still kind of going about doing their jobs, right? So that's good. Another interview that I had at the same office in Queens this week also um, turned out positively. We had an officer who it was a little difficult to read. She was professional and friendly, so that wasn't my worry, but she did zero in on an issue that I did not think would be an issue. So, in that case, my client came to the US also on a visitor visa. And then very shortly after they arrived in the US, they got married to their US citizen spouse. We are talking in under 1 month of entry. So they did not hire an attorney to file the green card application. So they were not aware of this 60, 90-day quote unquote rule that the State Department has that basically says if someone enters the United States in a temporary status such as visitor, that generally they should not be going about and applying for a change of status or an adjustment of status before the 60 or 90 days have gone by after the date of arrival. And why is there this State Department rule? It all goes to questioning the intent of the applicant at the time that they enter the United States. If someone has a visitor visa and they are coming to the US as a tourist, then they need to maintain that they don't have any intent to immigrate, i.e., apply for the green card. So if someone is entering the US on a B1, B2, and then let's say 2 weeks later they get married to a citizen, then an immigration officer could find or question, well, what was your true intent at the time that you sought to enter the US on the tourist visa? Did you really have ulterior motives, or did you really have this intent to get married right away and apply for the green card? Um, so when my clients realized that this could be an issue, they were referred to me and asked that I represent them at the interview in case this should come up. It actually did not come up. The officer did not even really raise it at all, but instead focused on other issues in the case. Um, I think that the interview lasted longer than normal. If I had to estimate it, the entire interview took around an hour and a half. So I was a little worried. Um, and I was also wondering if this was an unofficial Stokes interview. So a Stokes interview is an interview where USCIS really asks more questions than normal of the married couple to see if the marriage is bona fide. Um, if USCIS were to schedule a Stokes interview, the official way to do it is they would announce it. They would say that this was a Stokes interview, and the way that the interview notice looks like, it looks a certain way. It would say that it's an I-130 interview, and usually it will have a pretty detailed description of what the married couple should bring in terms of proof of the marriage. Well, these clients that I'm talking about that did not have a Stokes interview notice. It was just a regular looking I-485 interview notice, but uh, it doesn't mean that the USCIS officer can't then turn an adjustment interview into a Stokes. I've seen that happen a few times. I think usually if there's some kind of an issue or a red flag that has caught the attention of USCIS, they may decide to turn a regular adjustment interview into a Stokes. So I'm still not sure if this officer did a mini Stokes interview or unofficial Stokes interview on my clients. But long story short, my clients answered all of the officer's questions pretty well. I had prepped them extensively. So they handled all the questions, I think, in a pretty satisfactory manner. And although the officer didn't say at the end of the interview how she was going to decide, the next day my clients got a notice on their USCIS online account stating that the adjustment had been approved. So that's a great outcome. Very happy for my clients. But this is definitely moving forward, going to happen more and more. Immigration is going to be scheduling a lot more interviews than they have in the past. They're going to vet cases more thoroughly. So please prepare yourself. If you have an interview scheduled with USCIS and you don't have a lawyer, strongly recommend that you consider hiring an attorney to prepare you for these interviews. and to also have attorney representation at the interview.